And this closing in February that you were just talking about, this February 2010 closing, I mean, it's like a circus. I mean, it makes no sense at all. I mean, why are they closing it right now? I have a theory. Before I present the theory as to why they're closing it right now, let me point out that leading into this rather sudden closing are articles in the mainstream that are finally blowing the cover off the FBI's attempt to pretend that the attack anthrax was nothing extraordinary. We've got the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal both giving ample space to the plain fact that this stuff was weaponized with an extremely advanced technology. First it was the Wall Street Journal article, then the New York Times article, and a few days later they're suddenly closing the case. I mean, let's remember one thing that's pointed out by a lot of commentators. They just hired the National Academy of Sciences a few months ago to do a review of the science that went into the investigation of the anthrax attacks. The report by the National Academy of Sciences isn't due to come out until early summer. I mean, it's a mess is what it is. It's a terrible mess. It is not difficult to pick up the veil and see that the case against Ivins is absurd. We shouldn't even be spending any more time on taking it apart. It's absurd. It doesn't hold up for a second. And we need to start occupying ourselves with marshaling the facts that we do know, and then figuring out what this was. We already know. It's officially acknowledged. It's been officially acknowledged practically ever since it happened. This is an inside job. It came from within our own program, and it was not done by a lone nut. How ridiculous. I have a weekly column in Frederick. I now have a weekly column. I write a column for the Frederick News Post. And as I said in a recent column, the truth would be better served if we substituted for this dismissive phrase conspiracy theory the phrase lone nut theorist. I mean, we're supposed to believe that JFK was assassinated by a lone nut. We're supposed to believe that MLK was assassinated by a lone nut. We're supposed to believe that Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated by a lone nut. And we're supposed to believe that the anthrax attacks were committed by a lone nut. And it's pure, unadulterated disinformation. And that's very easy to see in the case of the anthrax attacks.
Wasn't Bruce Ivins working with wet anthrax as opposed to dry anthrax powder?
Absolutely, Bonnie. And that's a fundamental point here. His career, that's what he does. He works with a slurry, and he uses the slurry in his vaccine experiments. So the FBI, if you confront them directly and say, well, what piece of equipment are you saying at USAMRI could possibly have dried this stuff? And when that question is posed directly, the FBI avoids and says, well, we don't know, and it could have been, and we're not sure, and all this. But what they'll put out through their media shills is that he had a lyophilizer. The only problem is this lyophilizer that Bruce Ivins had at his disposal would have taken a year to dry that much anthrax without anybody knowing.
What was the significance of Bruce Ivins' flask, RMR 1029?
Okay, this is it. Practically all of the so-called wonderful science that underlies Amerithrax analyzes the genetic makeup of the attack anthrax. And what they find in this laborious process that takes years and years is that this particular anthrax, they not only determine that it's AIM strain, which is, well, it's been our strain. That's our strain. That's our bioweapon strain, AIM strain. But they not only figure out that it's AIM strain, that was pretty easy. They also, with this very advanced, technique, discover four, they call them markers, four genetic markers, otherwise referred to as morphotypes. And they say this is totally unique to this particular anthrax, and if we can find anthrax with the same morphotypes, that's obviously connected. All right? So they analyze RMR 1029, and they tell us RMR 1029 has the same four morphotypes. The attack anthrax must have come from RMR 1029. Who made RMR 1029? Answer, Bruce Ivins. Who's the custodian? Answer, Bruce Ivins. Bruce Ivins made RMR 1029 in 1997. We have the record of all the different places that he sent RMR 1029. When you ask the FBI DOJ how they eliminated as suspects all of the other people that had access to RMR 1029, there is no answer. There never has been an answer. There still is no answer. I mean, they make vague reference to polygraph tests. One problem with that is that Bruce Ivins passed 2 polygraph tests. What we have here is we have a cover-up. The very higher-ups in DOJ and FBI following a script that's dictated by powers that are more powerful than they are. And the purpose of the script is to hide where everybody by now should know this stuff came from. That's the purpose of the script. And it's been done very clumsily and very transparently.
Well, let me ask you a clarification on RMR 1029 that was in Bruce Ivins' possession, and then he sent on to other labs. Now, what form was RMR 1029 in? That was a liquid form, wasn't it?
Correct.
Well, now, the Anthrax attacks on Congress and the media was a dry form, wasn't it?
Well, not just a dry form, Bonnie. It's in the form of a very sophisticated, technologically advanced weapon. It's not just dry. It's extremely dispersible. That means when you open up the envelope in Senator Daschle's office and a very little bit escapes, it escapes like a gas. Like a gas. It shuts down the Hart office building for 3 months. They spent millions disinfecting the Hart office building from a mere opening up of an envelope.
Well, now, what I'm trying to get at here is, did Bruce Ivins ever have in his possession a dry anthrax?
No. Well, no. Bruce Ivins would have had no call for that. I mean, one of the reasons the answer to that is no is this. You don't mess around with this stuff unless you absolutely have to. So if you're doing, animal tests or whatever, you're not messing around with this stuff. It's too difficult to manage. I mean, you need very, very high biocontainment, extremely high degree of precaution when you're dealing with something like this. But the other point to make is that this technology that manifests, especially in the anthrax that was in the letters addressed to the senators, is technology that no one officially acknowledged existed. I mean, it was unknown up until that time. That's how sophisticated this was. And this has nothing to do with Bruce Ivins. In fact, I've got to cite this as a perfect example of just how silly this is. The FBI gave a science briefing on August 18, 2008, a few weeks after Bruce Ivins died. And the head guy, Majidi his name is, gets up there and says, in answer to a direct question about, well, isn't it important how this stuff was processed? He actually answers, no, that's not the important thing. The important thing is that the genetic identity was identical. I mean, he actually said that. And in fact, a significant part of the story is all these journalists from these most prestigious science journals sat there, and I mean, just let him do it. Didn't even confront him. I mean, and by then, of course, everybody should know if they don't. This stuff is extremely, extremely weaponized. That this technology doesn't happen except in secret programs in the United States with this strain.
I'm speaking with attorney and peace activist Barry Kissin. Today's show, the anthrax attacks and the system that perpetrated them. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. Well, now, to clarify for everyone, could you describe the weaponization of anthrax and the difference between the pre-1969 technology and the current technology? Because that gets to the heart of the science briefing where the cover-up takes place, doesn't it?
Well, this briefing I was just referring to is the FBI science briefing. It happened shortly after Ivins died. It's intended to satisfy everybody that there's scientific proof of Ivins' guilt. I mean, it's pure fabrication. I mean, it's silly. I mean, it's clumsy on its face.